Our topic today is progressive era political corruption and then subsequent political reforms. So let's go ahead and dive in there. So the issue when it comes to politics in the Gilded Age is corruption of the government. It could mean that our elected officials aren't doing what we ask them to do. It could be that they're being bribed by big businesses and that elections and laws that are passed are then not what the people really want. And it could also be that elections are rigged. So in some cities, control of local government was controlled by what's known as a political machine. A political machine is an organized group that runs a political party within a city. So they will use different methods to get who they want elected. And the person in charge of these are called machine bosses. They're leaders of a political machine. They win support by bribing for votes. So I'm going to write down that word, bribe. So they will target people who they know need help, usually during this time period, poor immigrants and poor people living in cities, and win their support by giving them something in exchange for them promising to vote for whoever the machine boss wants voted into office. So this could be providing a job, providing financial assistance in return for voting. There's also what's known as voter intimidation during this time period, because everyone knew who you were voting for. There was no secret ballot. We'll get to that in a second. So political machines were able to kind of, in cities, not in states, not in federal government, political machines were very much able to get elected who they want elected, and it wasn't a fair election. The most notorious was in New York City. The political machine was called Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was led by the political boss, William Tweed, sometimes known as Boss Tweed, and there he is right there. So he's in charge of this political machine. He's in charge of getting elected who he wants elected, who the machine decides should win the election. So it's kind of like an election, a voting rigging process that he's running. So the way that he did this was to give out things, jobs, money, food in return for political support. There is a political cartoonist, a muckraker, an investigative journalist named Thomas Nast, who begins to draw pictures of Boss Tweed and print them in newspapers, exposing what he's doing. Remember, muckrakers are investigative journalists who expose the ills of society. So he publishes them weekly in a magazine called Harper's Weekly, and we're going to work through some of them, and you're going to look at the quotes and things like that in class. So this is something that we'll do in class and we'll discuss. Don't worry about it right now until we get there, and we'll talk about those quotes in just a second as well. Again, we'll discuss in class. So how do we change the way that things are run politically? We have city government reform. Progressives want to clean up city, sometimes called municipal government, in order to stop elections from being rigged and to stop political corruption. So many mayors and governors regulate police forces, improve city funds, and try and stop voters from being intimidated or bribed into being voted for. At the state government, some progressive reforms get up to the state level. A great example of this is in Wisconsin. Robert La Follette is a Wisconsin governor, and he's a progressive himself, and he has this whole agenda of things he wants passed in Wisconsin, and they're electoral reforms to stop unfair voting from happening. State commissions to regulate railroads and utilities. So railroads and gas companies and steel companies and oil companies aren't these huge big businesses that then bribe legislatures and representatives into making votes that favor them. So stopping corruption in state government. And appointing people to oversee transportation and civil service and taxation that are supposed to be non-biased and non-partisan, so that they're not going to be skimming money off the top or hurting the government in any way or rigging anything in any way. So there are, in your notes, there's a chart of all these different election reforms. We're going to go through each one, and each of these is to make them fairer, make politicians more accountable to voters, and get voters more involved. So direct primary is the idea that voters select a party's candidates for public office. So a direct primary, like when we get to election day, we know who the two candidates are going to be for president, for example, because they've been picked through a primary election prior to this. Before this time period, the political parties chose who was going to be running for office, and so people had less of a choice. The 17th Amendment allows voters to directly elect their senators. Before this, it was state legislatures that chose our senators that would go to Congress, and Congress, the Senate is the upper house, so they have more power. So now this holds senators more accountable to people who can vote them out of office in 6 years if they don't like what they're doing, and it also allows individual people to be more involved. The secret ballot, sometimes called the Australian ballot, also allows for this. It is what it says. It is a secret voting method. So you go behind a curtain, you have all the candidates on one sheet of paper, and you choose who you're going to vote for, and you turn it in anonymously, but it's recorded that you voted. So if people are voting privately, they're not going to be intimidated. There's no coercion or persuasion that can go on. You can say, yeah, I'll vote for you, and then go in the room and vote for someone else if you don't actually like the candidate. So the Australian ballot, the secret ballot, before this time period, it was so much different. You would have to pick up a color card, like I'm voting Democrat, I'm going to pick up this color, walk across the room and put it in the ballot box. So everyone in the room knew who you're voting for because they can see you, and it's a different color per political party. So immigrants and just anyone were able to be intimidated into voting for someone because everyone could know who you voted for. So this gets rid of that form of political corruption. And then these last three were Robert La Follette of Wisconsin's idea, and not every state has these. Actually, Kentucky has almost none of them, but these are reforms that bring more power to the people instead of politicians. More power to people, because it allows people to have a more say in politics. For example, initiative allows citizens to propose new laws. Referendum allows citizens to vote on an existing or prior law. So not just election officials will be on your ballot. It might be like, do you approve for this law or not? And then recall allows voters to remove an elected official from office. And this is something that's actually happening in California right now his name is Governor Newsom, who was put through a recall election. Now, Kentucky does not have referendum and does not have recall at the state level. And some places in Kentucky at the local level, like city government, do have initiative where citizens can propose new laws. And also at the local level, Kentucky does have referendum, but not at the state level.